wanted to study language, gender, and sexuality, and I had some ideas about that. And I went to Wellington, wanting to work with Janet Holmes, who was my supervisor in the end, and as I'd hoped. And for the first year, I was just working there. I hadn't started the PhD yet, and I was trying to think a lot about what I could do. And it dawned on me that I had been a teacher in the New Zealand high school system a decade before that, but I'd moved on from that, and I was obviously doing other things. And so I realized I still had contacts in the school system. And although I wasn't particularly interested in studying pedagogy, because I'm much more interested in language, I realized there was an opportunity for those things to come together. Sexuality education classroom. This happened while I was reading the famous book by Cameron and Kulik, Language and Sexuality, which came out in 2003, quite a while before this. This would have been in about 2008, I suppose, around that time. And I read in their book that they were reflecting on a study at the time that was quite well known, had been out for some years, called WRAP, the Women, Risk and AIDS Project. And they were commenting that young women in this study that they cite were reluctant to initiate conversations about condom use with male partners because they feared being labeled as sluts. This is what was said. And then Cameron and Kulik pointed out that this reluctance to initiate could be traced back to a lack of a sense of agency in relation to sex on the part of these young women. And they asserted that, communicating about sex, obviously there's some changes to norms that needed to take place if this was going to change. Who can say what to whom and with what meaning? And they identified sex education as a place to start addressing this. And placing language at the center of these investigations, not looking at language as a medium for didactic messages about sex, but rather how language could be discussed as part of the process. And this inspired me to pursue it because I realized, okay, they're calling for this. This is a gap. This is something I'm, well positioned to do if I could find an access to a research site. Yeah. Alongside that, Louisa Allen, famous critical sexuality education studies scholar, who was based in Auckland, but was world renowned for this subject area, had called for more research into agency as well in relation to sexuality education. So there was these clarion calls coming from various places. And so I resolved to pursue it. And the reason that she thought it should be looked at more carefully is because of problematic positionings of students in sex education in ways that were perhaps foreclosing on their agency. And that was, they were in a double bind. And these sort of things have been identified by others as well with young people. For example, Penny Eckert had outlined earlier than that about how adolescents are positioned as being unfinished people and their judgment was lagging behind desires. So all of that added up to me pursue the idea that you should be doing language study in sex ed classrooms. It was certainly not a foregone conclusion that I would find a research site, and this was far from it, in fact. But this was the main challenge, actually, was finding somewhere where there was a sex education program that was substantial enough in length and was discussion based and would give me the kind of things I needed to record if I were going to be able to use the methodologies that I wanted to use to analyze it. And so that was one challenge because like a lot of places in the world, in New Zealand, although there was a robust curriculum for teaching sexuality education, it was not taught that often compared to other subjects because it was in optional subjects and things like that. And so in many schools, it was avoided for various reasons. And so I had to find a school that wasn't like that, and taught by a teacher who's interested in having me there. And a lot of teachers were understandably in some ways very nervous about that. And often curious about the way they teach the subject, and not really feeling ready for any level of scrutiny. As much as I tried to reassure them, that's really not what I was there to do. But finally, I found a teacher in a school near where I was living that would do it with me, and it was a fairly long search, although it wasn't that long in hindsight. It sure seemed like a long time, where I was going around to different schools and meeting with various teachers. And the solution in the end was the thing that worked was speaking to the the people at universities in New Zealand who were responsible for supporting sex ed teachers out in schools, because they had a really good idea of who might possibly be a candidate for this sort of thing. And that was what led me to the cooperating teacher I worked with. Yeah. And that was a bit of luck, a bit of persistence. Yeah, that was the main challenge, actually.